Welcome back to part 2 of our interview with John Bonnell, co-founder of Wholly Veggie. Now, back to John. You know, a lot of these retailers are struggling to differentiate themselves, and so they need these new products like you've got. And if what they're doing is putting up an immediate barrier to a small business, then they're going to struggle to find, a whole range of new and interesting products. So I suppose the thing that you're up against, of course, is private label. Is that a lot of times they're now creating these kind of replica products off the back of companies like yours, and again, they'll just copy you and move on if you're not willing to pay to play, which is unfortunate, I suppose. So, what was your? Sorry, go ahead.
No, just on the private label thing, I find it's a bit of a symbiotic relationship. A lot of retailers they like to have a national brand and then private label beside it, because it acts as a price competition. But look, there's no replacement for brand. And I think, if you continue to keep your head down and build your brand and you make a great product, you can continue to win over customers. But the landscape is changing. Everybody wants to be Trader Joe's in the retail business.
Yeah, and it's what's ironic about that is when you look at their strategy, none of these companies are even willing to come close to embracing the philosophy of Trader Joe's to be Trader Joe's. They're anyway, it's a longer discussion. So your first major win was Metro.
Yep.
And so you mentioned that you were, the first thing that you were presenting to them was vegetarian burgers or veggie burgers.
Yep.
So at the time, what was the space like? Like what were you sitting amongst in terms of competition?
It's crazy to think about what the competitive landscape looked like back then in Canada versus today. And we're talking 4.5 years. And I feel like, Murphy's Law hit overdrive for plant-based food. And it is completely changed. When we launched, there was Ease was in the set. And Ease was basically your dominant, vegan and vegetarian-based product. The equivalent to that is Morningstar in the U.S. and frozen. And our strategy at that time, Dave and I, was we got a hold of the data, Nielsen's data, which is sell-through data, and we looked at the 3 lowest performing items for Eves. And we went into retail and we said, look, we can guarantee you that if you bring our items in replacement of these 3 low performing Eve SKUs, you won't do worse than the Eve numbers, right? We'll do as well, if not better. And we had that conviction in what we were saying. We knew we could take out those 3 low performing SKUs. And there was a few other young companies that were coming up at the time as well, but so much has changed. And I think the one thing people need to remember is the power of eyeballs and the power of brand. When we saw Beyond Meat launch in Canada, even though we make a radically different product, and even though Beyond's strategy was to put their product in the meat case, it had an impact on our sales. And I think everyone forgets that while the number of products are multiplying, while the number of consumer interest is growing, the wallet is the wallet. At the end of the day, you're competing for share of wallet. And a customer can't buy your product and then buy 6 more new things. A trade-off does happen, and that really puts the pressure on you to understand your competitive landscape and sometimes force you to pivot, because if a huge player comes in and just takes over the airwaves, is buying the Super Bowl spot, signing up the huge influencers, you're going to have a real tough time. And so your only play at that in that angle is it's really either like learn from that and pivot, or learn from that and adjust your marketing to be a little more nimble where the big player can't play.
So that's a great point, because just because you guys come along doesn't mean the retailer is going to add another 6 inches to their shelf. They're basically, it's ultimately a decision that they're going to replace somebody with you, or they're going to replace you with somebody else.
Yeah.
So what was the big first win for you guys in terms of seeing a product that started to gain traction?
It was interesting. Once we started landing retailers, so after Metro, we secured Loblaw's business, which was a big, big move for us. It got us kind of more mainstream appeal, and we really doubled down on the trade shows. But the biggest psychological win for us as a company at that time was we landed Target. And what had happened was we always had a plan to enter the U.S. marketplace, but it's happened quicker than we thought. And TED puts on their global conference in Vancouver. We got invited to be there as a food vendor. And at the show, you weren't allowed to take photos, but my sales guy, John, who came on with us very early on as one of the original people in the business, and he's messaging me and he's like, "Oh my God, Al Gore just tried our products." And 2 minutes later, "Oh my God, Sergey Brin just tried our products." And so I said to John, get the business cards. And he got the business card of a very high ranking person at Target. She was lovely with us and sent an email, didn't hear back, sent a follow up, and she replied back. And she said, "You know what? Love what you guys did. Come and present to our team." And, we still were super bootstrapped on cash. So we drove from Toronto to Minneapolis, which if you've done that drive is between 12 and 14 hours. And there was 3 of us jam-packed in a car. We all stayed in one hotel room. We shipped down our products on dry ice and we kept them in our hotel room. And we pitched that day. And we won 220 Target stores. And literally it changed our perspective on things. And it was the hugest win because that became our calling card to approach other retailers in the US.
So when you were you're in that room, describe what it was like. How many people were there? What was the physical environment like? What were you presenting? And when did you find out that they'd given you those stores?
Yeah, so Target's got an incredible head office in downtown Minneapolis. They basically own downtown Minneapolis. And we walked in and they sent us up to a commercial kitchen room where we could present. And I'm used to buyers arriving right on time or just running a couple minutes late. We were preparing the samples. So John was with us and he was preparing the food. He's cooking the samples. Dave was with me. We're rehearsing our pitch. Target buyers came in the room 5 minutes early. We were not ready. And it was a VP and 2 buyers at the time. And it was a moment of oh my God, we're not ready. So I nudged John. I'm start cooking faster. And we go into the pitch. And all of a sudden I hear the main VP say, "I think you're burning the burgers." John was cooking so fast, was so nervous. He started burning one of the patties.
It's so funny, John. Sorry. When somebody who cooks, when I heard you say cook faster, I thought, well, naturally you think you just turn up the heat. Yeah, it doesn't work that way.
That's what we did. And so we burned the burgers. We get a new batch on there. And it was a really interesting presentation because they asked great questions. So on the spot, they asked what our social media profile was like. And I said, it's growing. And she went right into a profile and she goes, "You only have 3,300 followers." And it was on the spot. You had to react and describe more of your point of view. Why do you think you do well with a Target shopper? And it was a really engaging conversation. And we didn't find out for several months afterwards. And, the way we found out was, we had a call with the buyer. And I was in the UK at the time. I was in London because we had actually called on a connection to go and pitch Virgin Airlines for a lot of their airline food. And we were scrambling, trying to find an open place. And so I pulled my laptop, I hotspotted my phone. We got on the Zoom, the equivalent of the Teams call back then. And she's like, "We're bringing you in." And it was just pure joy. It was pure joy. But the one thing you find in the food business, and I'm not sure how other industries are, you pitch, you present, then you wait. And the waiting, and you don't really know what's going to happen between your presentation date, and it can be up to 5 months from your presentation date to you winning business. And then once you win business, you got 4 months to get the product ready into the store. And it's really tough because when you're working with, at a larger scale, co-packers on items, they ask you, what's the forecast when you're launching? I have to just guess on what retailers in the US marketplace will bring our product in. We have more confidence in Canada because we've been around for a lot longer, but it's really, really nerve-wracking. Like,
so
whether you're going to win.
How long did you wait to hear from Target?
So that presentation, that was for an October reset. So that presentation was in June. And I think we found out that one wasn't too bad. I think we presented in March. No, we presented in March, and we found out in like July, like June, July.
Wow. And so did they give you 220 stores out of the gate?
220 out of the gate.
Wow.
Now we're in 1,200 Target stores.
Wow.
They're an incredible retailer. There's nobody like them. Very unique, very data driven. And they just know their shoppers so well. The one thing too you realize with Target is that it's not like a normal grocery store in a way where, the whole store is focused on grocery. They have a shopper that comes in that's shopping baby, shopping home, shopping apparel. Like, they're shopping all these different categories. Food is part of that process. And so it really requires you to think about the right way to target not to say targeting, the target shopper.
So it's funny because it sounds like, for a lot of people that would be interested in doing what you've done, just the very idea of saying, I've got to find what I think is a product. I've got to find a product I think will fill a gap. I've got to have that product developed. I've got to get it in front of a retailer. I've got to get the retailer to buy in, and then I've got to scale up. I mean, that is a massive undertaking, and yet you are still a business that's very much in its infancy.
Yeah.
So
you're.
Yeah. So I was going to ask, what's your headspace like now?
I like to say that as each year progresses, your focus changes in terms of what you want to do with the company. Right now, we're really big on trying to inject more process into the company and bring more leadership into our company. I think one of the things that entrepreneurs face as a challenge is when they're first starting their company. You don't have much money, and you can't afford really senior people. So you often bring in people that are kind of earlier in their career, and it's a massive win because you get people that are young, that are hungry, and that want to inject change. But as an entrepreneur, the one thing you have to remember is while you're selling this great product, you also have to build a great culture, and you have to make sure people feel like they're being invested in your career planning. You're helping them grow in their career. They're getting good leadership and mentorship. And as an entrepreneur, when you don't have many staff and you're just focusing on bringing young people, sometimes you don't give people the right management. And that's something that we've even been struggled with. And we started to bring in some more senior people into our company to give more leadership, to focus on culture, to bring in process. And, it doesn't take away from what makes a young company special. I think I like to describe it as it more takes the magic and turns it into a consistent and process-oriented thing.
That's interesting. And so last two questions. One is a follow-up to my last one. It's, an entrepreneur starts off with a dream in their head, and then they become a business person. And the business can often take over. The operation of the business distracts from the dream you had in your head. Maybe it distracts from the thing that makes your heart sing every day. And I'm curious, how you're managing that. Like, how do you stay focused on the stuff that you love that got you into the business, versus the stuff that you described, which is turning it into a proper company?
Yeah, I think the one thing you can't forget is your purpose. And, one of the focuses for us this year is trying to better communicate our purpose internally and externally. And I think you can forget that when you start operating your business. You get so focused on weekly revenue targets, on managing your cash, on managing people, on getting stuff done on time, on doing your social media. Purpose is something that drove you at the very beginning. Was your guiding light at the very beginning, and you need to keep that going as the company progresses. And so, right now I'm really focused on how we as a company can make our purpose a bigger part of our DNA, and start giving back to this community that we operate in, and giving back to the planet. And that's something that I think it's really tough to consistently do, but so important.
That is a beautiful answer, because it segues into my next question, which is, when you think back about what the personal meaning of this business when you first started out, how do you think that that's translated into an effect, to an impact on the consumer where you are today, based on where you are today?
That's a great question. I think when we first started this company, we had this idea, which was, how could we help give an alternative in the supply chain? And I think every time, and tell Dave this, every time someone buys one of our products, they've made a conscious choice to eat something that supports a more sustainable system. And we don't quantify that all the time. McDonald's likes to talk about how many customers served, how many burgers, how many fries. Like, you hear about from the big chains, like what they talk about. I think we need to start quantifying the positive things that we're doing. And I think we're doing it. That hasn't been lost on us. We're doing it. We just haven't come up with a way to externally communicate that as a company. But yeah, I think it all comes down to why you started the company in the beginning. Are you still doing it? Are you still delivering on it? And it's really hard to sometimes escape from the reality of running a day-to-day business. Like I was telling you before we started this, how my emotions are tied to the up and down swings of revenue in our business, which is typical. You get cyclical patterns with revenue in our business. I wake up, I look at my phone, I'm in a terrible mood, and if it's going the other way, I could be in a super positive mood. And I think being even keeled is really tough, but you have to try to find a way as an entrepreneur to do something that creates more balance in your life, whether that's exercise, whether that's you're reading a book, whether that's talking to a friend. Like, you can forget it. It can be all absorbing, and then the ride can end, and you could say, why did I do that? Like, why did I just go and spend 6 years running this company? What am I left with?
I heard a great story, and like many people, I'm a big admirer of Steve Jobs. Despite all the stuff that's come out about how he was as a manager, etc., as an entrepreneur, you could probably relate to the challenges a person like that with a strong vision has. It's hard to also be a nice guy that all the time. But I used to work with a fellow that had worked at Apple, and he said he was on a call one time with Steve Jobs, and it was when they were launching the iPhone into Asia, and it was in the very close lead up to Christmas. And Jobs was looking at the retail program, the retail execution. And he said to the team on the phone, he said, this is just not good enough. And the senior person in Apple said, well, Steve, look, we got to get this out the door. The retailer's waiting for it. And Jobs said, I don't give a shit about the retailer. He said, we're not throwing our brand under the bus just to make a retailer's deadline. Do it again. And I thought, you know what? It is Apple and it was Steve Jobs. But at the same time, it's the little incremental dilutions of your focus that ends up putting you at a disadvantage to bigger companies that dominate the shelf. So that focus is critical, I think. Really critical.
On that, it's, like to say, if you bought something the first time in a terrible experience, do you think that person's going to say, man, I can't wait to buy that crappy pizza slice again? No. You've got one shot. And you got to remember, just do it and do it right. Maybe that means you've got to delay your revenue forecast a bit. Maybe that means you're not make that retailer happy, but you have to do what's right. And it takes some,
because the retailer's not going to hesitate to delist you just because you said, but I did it to make you happy.
Look, and the funny thing about retail is I hear all these quotes all the time that I remember. I remember early on when we were talking to someone who's super experienced with Whole Foods, and he told me, he goes, John, you never ever own the space on the shelf. You're only ever renting. And it's true. And you can get evicted. You can get evicted if you don't pay their equivalent of rent, which is you don't deliver revenue per inch per shelf. And that's essentially what they're doing. They're trying to maximize that shelf space, just like a retailer is maximizing the front of a window. Like, you need to perform. Nobody's here to be your friend just because they want to be your friend. They want you to be successful, but you need to show them you can be successful. And then it's a happy partnership. And
as a follow-up to that point, I worked pretty extensively with Nokia in the waning days of their dominance as a mobile phone brand. I remember I asked a senior guy there if they'd ever had success in Japan, and they said, no. The Japanese consumer is really loyal. They love their own brands. And I said, well, has any Western brand dominated? And they said, oh yeah, Apple went in and killed everybody. And I suppose that's the upside of dedicated focus to what you believe in.
Yeah, absolutely.
So listen, I just want to thank you. That was such an interesting conversation. I wish you so much success. It is a phenomenal product. So if you're in North America and you're listening and watching this interview, Wholly Veggie, 1,200 Target stores, Loblaws, you got to go try them. So thank you again, John. Really do appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And thank you for creating this platform for entrepreneurs like us to be able to tell our stories.
Thanks. Thanks so much for sticking to the end of our two-part interview with John Bonnell, co-founder of Wholly Veggie. I hope something in this story may have inspired you to consider creating the next game-changing business. And as always, I want to give a big shout out to my amazing sponsor, the Innovation Hub at Carleton University, dedicated to helping create leaders and new business ventures just like John's. Find out more at www.carleton.ca/innovationhub. And please remember to hit like and subscribe for more great stories of inspired entrepreneurs.